Hey, what's up guys, Alex here, and today I want to give you 3 tips on how to make your orchestral pieces sound more alive, interesting and realistic without overdoing it. So if you have like the problem that your orchestral stuff sounds too much bland, too much boring, this tutorial is going to help you, and this is also going to help you if you have the opposite problem where your orchestrations are all over the place and super hard to follow. So yeah, for the purpose of this tutorial, we're going to analyze this Final Fantasy 15 remix that I posted on this same YouTube channel a few months ago, but never made a tutorial on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to listen to the track. And if you already listened to this cover, maybe skip 2 minutes from now. But if you haven't, I'm going to play it first, and then we're going to analyze this track to, extract some knowledge from it. So the track is kinda loud, so prepare yourself. I'm going to play it in 3, 2, 1... So yeah, that's the track we're going to analyze today, and by the way, I should mention that there are some things I will not mention in this tutorial, so if by the time you're done with this orchestral tutorial, you want to learn even more about this epic orchestral music, I suggest you to check out the rest of the tutorials on this channel, because there's lots of information there. And yeah, but if you have questions about this tutorial, also feel free to ask them in the comment section of this video, because I answer to questions all the time too. Without further ado, let's get into the 3 tips I have for you today. The first tip, very important if you want to make things more easy for you when it comes to orchestrating or writing an orchestral track, is this. Start from a piano arrangement. Like when you begin a new orchestration or a new orchestral piece, a good thing to do, and it's something that most composers do, even more accomplished composers, is to jot down your main ideas on a piano, and make a short piano arrangement with the chord progressions and the main melodies of the track, so you can understand right away if your track is good enough to be orchestrated, because if it sounds good and interesting on piano, then it's very likely to sound good on the orchestra. And if it doesn't sound good on piano, it's very likely it will not sound good on the orchestra. This is not 100% true all the time, but it's a good, indicator of success, and it takes way less time to write a short arrangement on piano than it takes to write a full orchestrated arrangement for many reasons. Writing orchestral music is really time consuming, and you have to put in a lot of details, but writing a piano sketch takes way less time. So once you have that piano sketch, you can understand clearly if your track is worth it to be orchestrated, and also you can, once you have those main ideas written down on piano, you do not risk losing them while you orchestrate, because you can then use that piano arrangement as a foundation or a map you can use while you orchestrate. So, while you're writing all the single orchestral parts, maybe if you feel lost or if you feel something is missing, you can go back to the piano arrangement and check it out and listen and clearly understand what is missing in the orchestration. So, this thing about starting from piano is really, really important. It's not always needed, but it makes things easier, because, it makes you understand the quality of your piece right away, and it helps you not get lost, and it helps reduce the amount of anxiety you might have when you open a new track and you have that blank, file, blank project in front of you, and it's like, oh my god, I need to write all the orchestra. But if you start from a single piano idea, it's much less daunting, and it really gets you started. So do not underestimate this tip. I did not start from a piano arrangement in this case, because this is a study I made from a Final Fantasy 15 track. So I took this track and listened to it and rewrote it entirely by ear, and also by adding a little few things. But it's not my track. But for my original tracks, I usually start from a piano idea. Either I write the MIDI with mouse and keyboard, or I jam it. I jam with the piano here and try to come up with something, or even guitars and stuff. It helps. The main point behind many of the tips I'm going to give you today is, if you want to write a big, interesting and dynamic orchestration like this one, what you need to do is to define first the general outline, and then you get narrower and narrower, and you start to define all the single details. So writing down the main piano idea is basically defining the domain, like the main general outline of the track. And orchestrating that general outline is basically filling it with details, because after you wrote the piano arrangement, what you need to do is you take every single voice of the piano and you interpret it onto different orchestral instruments. For example, you might take, the bass, or rather the root notes of the chord progression you wrote for the piano, and use those same notes in the double basses, or maybe in the bass trombones of the orchestration, to define the lower register of the orchestration. Although, one thing to keep in mind is that if you want your orchestration to sound realistic, human, and interesting, you should not just copy-paste, You should also, when you take notes from the single piano voices and use those same notes in your orchestration on different orchestral instruments, what you need to do is to arrange for that type of instrument. And I'm going to talk about this more on the second tip. So the second tip is very important as well, and it is quite basic also. Most composers already know this and already do this, but beginners tend to overlook it. So the second tip is give character to every single instrument family, or at least try to focus on giving character to every single instrument family. So with this, I mean, do not just copy-paste stuff, Do not be lazy about orchestrating for a certain instrument, Beginners, or rather, beginners tend to do this. For example, maybe they have a very rich orchestral strings section, and then the percussion is very uninteresting. It's just copy-pasted notes all over the place. Or maybe maybe they have a very interesting percussive rhythms, but then they have very boring strings and brass, because they're just the copy-paste of each other. They have the same type of notes without any degree of interpretation, and without any articulation changes and stuff like that. So let's check out what the original composer Yoko Shimomura did on this track to make, to give character to every single instrument family. And with the instrument family, I mean strings, brass, percussion, etc. Anyway, let's take a look at the way Yoko Shimomura did justice to this piece by, orchestrating it in a very interesting way. For example, in this passage here, let's analyze the orchestra only. in this part, the orchestra sounds really amazing, alive, and it's like, fucking epic, you know? But why is that? You know, there are a few reasons why that is. One of the reasons is surely the fact that Yoko Shimomura is a freaking amazing composer, and she can come up with very interesting melodies, counter melodies, color responses between instruments, and also chord movements. But outside of that, there's still a big reason why this sounds so interesting, and it's that she gave a different purpose to every single instrument family. For example, let's check out the violins alone, the strings alone. They are very solemn, very solemn. They define they present again the melody, the face of the track, and the harmony in long, dynamic articulations. So they really, with this type of sound, gives off really the emotive side of the track. So the strings here in this section bring the emotion and make you empathize with the feelings of, the solemnity of the mission of the protagonist. And then we have the brass, which is doing something different entirely. This sound much more adventurous. So while the strings are presenting the feeling of the protagonist into this battle, the brass is presenting the adventurous tone of the battle itself, So they are having different purposes, different roles, And then we have the choir, which is presenting the more epic, apocalyptic feeling of the track. It's much more dramatic than the brass and then the strings. So as you can see, what Yoko Shimomura did is that she asked herself, I guess, what do I want the strings to convey? And then what do I want the brass to convey? And what do I want the choir to convey? And when you ask yourself these questions, instead of just copy-pasting everything on every single instrument section, when you ask yourself, what do I want the choir to do? What do I want the strings to make people feel like? It's going to be more natural for you to come up with interesting ways to write or to arrange for those instruments. So if you want the strings to convey emotion, it's natural that you're going to use more, long articulations with dynamic, changes in the modulation wheel. Instead, if you want adventurous brass, if you want things to sound adventurous, of course, you're going to use more marcatos and stuff like that. And yeah, instead, if you want choir to sound really epic, apocalyptic, of course you're going to use clusters like this. It comes more natural, at least to me, to orchestrate by asking, really realistically and variably when I ask myself questions like, what do I want this section to do? What do I want this section to convey? What type of messages I want them to say or to express? So that's why the orchestra sounds so rich here. And then another section which I forgot to mention is my favorite, which is the percussion. Let's check out what the percussion is doing in this part instead. So as you heard, the percussion sounds good even on its own, and this is something I think extra. In orchestral track, there's usually not that much degree of percussion, but in my tracks personally, I love to use them a lot because they help you in defining the rhythm. They help the listener into getting more into the track. So what the track convey or what the percussion convey or the purpose that the percussion have in this part is, one, to define the broadness of the track, because we have these trailer hits and, trailer booms and crashes going on, stuff like this. Sorry, let me isolate. So they really make the thing sound amazing and huge. So one purpose of the percussion is that, making things sound huge. And then they also have a more rhythmic, purpose. So yeah, I talked about percussion in the percussion tutorial, so if you want to know more about how to make interesting percussive rhythms, go check out that tutorial. But yeah, as you can see, like even the percussion serve a different purpose. The third tip is quite unethical, I guess, but it helps me into simplifying things, and it's this. So consider your orchestra as if it was a giant band, and maybe it's like it's very similar in the end, it's pretty much a giant band if you think about it. And with this I mean, like, I do not know if you ever were in a band, and if you never played in a band, maybe you should, because it helps you understand a little bit of things about music composition and about performance. Anyway, what I mean by this is, for example, say you're in a band and you're, I don't know, the bass player. Usually what you play as a bass player depends on what the drummer is playing. The rhythms the drummer is playing determine the grooves you come up with on your bass. And now, the notes you come up with inside your grooves determine the chords that, I don't know, the keyboard or the second guitar is going to play, because the notes you play are usually going to be the root notes of the chords that the second guitar is going to play. And now, the first guitar, which is playing the lead, the lead guitar, the melodies which the first guitar will play will depend on the chords that the second guitar is playing. So as you see, like, the first guitar depends on the second guitar, that depends on the bass, that depends on the drummer, So it's this very interesting cycle, and creates a very interesting synchronism between every instrument. So that's what I mean by this. So in an orchestral setting, this will translate maybe to having the percussion define the main rhythm and accents, which might be followed by the instrument playing short articulations, like, for example, string ostinati. So have the string ostinati be defined, like their rhythm be defined by the rhythm and the accent of the percussion, for example. Or you could have, I don't know, the double basses and the bass trombones define the root notes of the chord progressions, which are going to be played by the cellos, the violas, the French horns, and the choir, and stuff like that. And maybe you can have, like, the first violin play melodies, and maybe women choir play melodies based on the chord progressions that are being played by the rest. So as you see, like, there's again this chain effect. And I think in an orchestral section it's quite a bit more difficult to make, but as long as each instrument you have in your track is tied to at least one other instrument or another instrument family in this way, it's going to be more easy and more natural for you to come up with some interesting call and response dialogues between instruments, and it's going to be natural and easy to make everything sound more cohesive, instead of having elements fight for attention inside your track. Another cool thing to do to avoid having elements fight for attention is to have, like, consider as if instrument had a spotlight and the background, So in certain parts of your track, you might leave some instruments in the background and bring some to the front, And a cool thing to do is to change those, like to switch, to make instrument not fight for the spotlight, but to dedicate the spotlight to a different instrument on every section, or to switch, from time to time. So let's check out what the composer did here, for example. In the first part, you're going to notice the spotlight is on the first violin, and in here, the spotlight becomes of the choir. So here we hear the first violins very clearly. And here the choir comes into the spotlight as well. But it's not as if they're fighting, like the choir is based on everything else. So the violin becomes something, a bit of a background element along with the rest, and the choir comes in and becomes something you hear more. And this spotlight thing is also determined by tonality and octaves, because the human ear tends to perceive higher sounds with higher pitch with more. So if you want to make something sound more in the spotlight, what you should do is you should place it at maybe the highest pitch possible in the orchestration so far. Go to the higher octave. That is why you can hear the choir here more clearly. If we were to take this choir and lower it by an octave, I think it wouldn't sound as noticeable. Yeah. Quite makes a difference. And yeah, a good thing is to change the spotlight. So here it changes again after we put the attention on the choir. Here the choir and the first violins fade away, and the solo oboe player comes in. So now the spotlight is all for the oboe, while in the background we have the piano and the strings playing harmonic stuff. And again, they are not like, the instruments are not fighting for space. There are some instruments in the background which are defining, the mood and making the track evolve, but the protagonist is the oboe in this part. But let's check out what happens in this part instead. In this part, the spotlight is quite shared between all the instruments. All the instruments are playing something similar in unison. And it sounds so epic and powerful because of that, because up until that point, we only had one or two instruments in the spotlight and everything on the background. But in here, it's most instruments become like the center of attention together, and they play all the same thing together. So they are not fighting between each other. They are cooperating to create something amazing in the spotlight. And there are some instruments in the background which are even bringing it even higher, even making the whole thing even more dramatic. For example, the French horn is supporting the whole thing. So yeah, you should try to manage the spotlight and try to dedicate it to a few instruments at a time. If you want to make your track really variable, it's a good practice is to change the instrument inside the spotlight, so that the attention of the listener goes from instrument to instrument, but without making it chaotic, And yeah, that's one thing that you will learn if you play in bands. You will learn this. And also a good thing to do if you're clueless about this is to listen to music by great bands with great orchestration. And a good band I suggest you for this is Muse. Like Muse is a 3-instrument band, like not 3 instruments, like 3-player bands, and in their records, like, yeah, they have more than 3 instruments. But anyway, like they have a very interesting orchestration, a very interesting way to arrange their songs. And really listening to their songs will make you a more expert composer, in my opinion. And another great band I suggest you to check out is Narky Puppy, and they are more of a jazz band, like jazz orchestral, and they are fucking amazing. And yeah, you should listen to those 2 bands and analyze their music and see how they make everything make every element synchronize, and how they manage the spotlight in their song, how they keep it variable and stuff like that. So to recap, like the first tip is start from a piano arrangement, so you can define the general outline really easily before starting going into the details. The second tip is give every instrument family a different purpose and a different character. You can do this by first by asking yourself, what do I want these instruments to convey? What messages do I want them to convey? What character do I want them to have, and why? And also, you can do this by using different articulations and switching between them. And the third tip is treat your orchestra as if it was a giant band, and try to make every instrument have a relationship with at least another instrument. Try to create that synchronism and manage the spotlight in such a way to have your instruments cooperate instead of have your instrument fight between each other. Also, listen to Muse and listen to Snarky Puppy. And by the way, I haven't talked too much about the track itself in this tutorial because this track is quite particular actually, and I also wrote it a few months ago, so there are some things I do not remember about it. So if you're interested in checking this out on your own with the project file and everything, you can download the project file on Patreon, which contains the audio clips of every instrument and the MIDI data. It does not contain the sample libraries though. So yeah, if you go on my Patreon page and if you pledge, you can download the project file of every track I released on YouTube so far, so that might help you into understanding more of this stuff. And I take this chance to give a really great thank you to all the people who donated there, because they are helping me big time into sustaining this channel. And another thing I suggest you to do if you want to learn how to make orchestral music is to check out the rest of this channel, of course, because there are a lot of tutorials about that. And also go check out Evident Cinematic Music course, because that is a course I really recommend, which is done by a dear friend of mine who is really an amazing composer. And it's quite an investment, but it pays off big time. So you might want to check that one out if you're interested. The link to the course is in the description of this video. And by the way, I think they're also having something like a 20% off sale right now. So this might be the time to get that course. So yeah, that will be all for the tutorial of the day. And wow, thank you guys for the 5,000 subscribers. I wouldn't think that this channel will grow so much in such a short amount of time. Like, I'm really glad this is bringing so much value to so many people. It's really great. So yeah, thank you for following this channel, and I'll see you in the next one.